Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today's episode is incredibly timely because I think so many people right now feel emotionally overloaded. There's uncertainty in business, uncertainty in relationships, uncertainty financially, and honestly, many people feel like they're mentally surviving instead of truly living. But today's guest believes that chaos is not something we're supposed to avoid. But today's guest believes that people and companies that thrive the most are the ones who learn how to master uncertainty instead of resisting it. Joining me today is Ted Santos. He is the CEO of Turnaround Investment Partners and the creator of the Disruptive Leadership Model. So, Ted works with CEOs, executives, and organizations to help them navigate instability, transform culture, and create breakthrough growth during periods of massive disruption and change. So, Ted has spent years helping companies scale without collapsing, helping leaders think differently, and teaching people how to turn pressure into innovation instead of panic. And honestly, I think this conversation applies to every human being listening right now. So, Ted, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this subject today. Chaos is something that is unavoidable, and the world is shifting and changing, and there's so much uncertainty in the world right now. So, why do you think that so many people are so emotionally exhausted by uncertainty and change?
I'd say part of it is we're educated in our education system, we are rewarded for giving the right answer. So when you
Mm.
put people into uncertainty and it's difficult to have the right answer, it creates all kinds of conversations about, am I really as smart as I think? Am I worthy? Am I really good? And you start to doubt yourself.
Absolutely. That's so true. We're rewarded. We get a sticker if we get 100% on a test, right? So,
Right. Right.
we've been conditioned to think that we always need the right answer. What do you think that constant chaos is actually doing to the human mind and nervous system?
Well, from a brain perspective, it's actually good because if you think about it, it technically, as humans, we really are designed to be able to deal with uncertainty. I mean, there's so much that we didn't know how to do when we were infants. We didn't know how to walk, to feed ourselves, and our brains had to develop and grow, and we grow neural pathways that allow us to be able to do new things. So we've always been doing new things, and when you go to school, whether you're learning your alphabet, how to count, sentence structure, grammar, mathematics, all of these things are instances where we were going into something we didn't know how to do.
Yeah.
For some reason, when we become adults, we have an aversion. It's like we're allergic to engaging in activities with uncertainty. But as children, that was part of the excitement about life is learning new things. And we don't hold the same, we don't revel in that kind of uncertainty and learning new things. We are just looking for things to be sort of constant, even though we are told if you stay at status quo, you become obsolete eventually. So I would say it's really in us, but somewhere we break away from that childhood curiosity. And, the word curiosity, when you think of Albert Einstein, he once said something like, I'm not more intelligent than other people. I'm just infinitely more curious.
Okay. I like that. It's interesting because if I think back to every single instance that I've ever felt anxiety because of uncertainty, in the end, everything always worked out. So whether it was like, being in university and having to pay my rent and not really knowing where that money's going to come from, it always worked out, like no matter
Right.
what. But when I was trying to control the situation, I feel like it made me more anxious and everything a lot more challenging. It's like the control caused more barriers versus being in flow and just believing that everything's going to work out. And I'm not saying just sit there and believe and not act, but
Right. Right.
what's the point of worrying about it, right?
Well, I would also wonder if our society is obsessed with happiness. I just have to be happy. And now I hear
Mm,
people using the word peace. I want peace. I want happiness. The ancient Greeks, I would say, had a much better handle on these ideas. So happiness technically, and this may be hard for people to hear. For me, happiness is like air. It's there for you. The way you become unhappy is to say, I'm unhappy. No, and therefore no one can give you happiness and no one can take it away from you. But in ancient Greece, they had a word eudaimonia. I spelled Damainoia, something like that, eudaimonia. And people will often confuse it for happiness. What it's really about is accomplishing something that required difficulty and obstacles, and you overcame them and accomplished it. And that was the state that the ancient Greeks, they strove for that. Instead of saying, "Oh, I want to be happy and peaceful," they would say, I want to achieve eudaimonia. That means I'm going to take something on that is going to put me uncertainty, perhaps chaos. It's going to have obstacles. I won't know how to do it all. But once I accomplish it, I have this state of accomplishment. And so I would say that's a much healthier mindset to strive for instead of saying I just want to be happy. And when there's a bump in the road, it's like, oh, I'm not happy now. Or we delegate our happiness to someone else and say, well, you didn't make me happy, or I want to be in this relationship or marriage with the hope that you will make me happy.
Absolutely. It's not up to anyone else but ourselves. No one can make us happy but us. And there's so much more peace when you accomplish something after going through that uncertainty, like you mentioned. And I don't know, I always think of the airport when I think of releasing control because essentially anything could happen at the airport. I always look around and I always observe others. And the people that are miserable because their flight is delayed, it gets harder and harder and harder, and you can feel the angst in their body, like, if they're wearing a Fitbit, that thing is, like, on red alert because
Right,
their
right,
stress level is through the roof.
right.
But if you think of that situation as like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like I have zero control of this situation right now, so I might as well make the best of it. It's so much easier on the body and then good things happen. Like when I've released control, I've met amazing people. I've got free food on the flight just because I remained in that calm, peaceful state. But the
Okay.
only person that is in control of that is me. So I think it's a powerful thing.
Right. And also if you think about it, when I going back to eudaimonia, if you intentionally find these possibilities for you to achieve, what you're also doing is exercising a greater capacity to be able to deal with uncertainty, chaos, crises, because you're intentionally putting yourself in that situation. And in life, things happen. Flights get delayed. I remember I don't know, I must have been flying from California back to the East Coast, and we're on the runway. We're starting to take off. The plane accelerates, and a ton of people start screaming on the plane because they saw fire come out of the engines. So we go to the
Okay.
side, they check the plane, then we go back. It was too windy, so we ended up, it was like we didn't take off. We had to stay in a hotel, and so we had all these problems. And the pilot said, in this because this was at nighttime, they said if it was in the daytime, the flames would have shot out the engine and no one would have seen it. But since it was
Right.
nighttime, you could see it and people panicked. And so the point was that was not unusual for flames to shoot out of the engine. So, but in life, things happen. So if when there's a bump in the road, you're going to fall apart, how do you better manage? How do you develop a mindset? So the idea of taking on things that stretch you beyond your normal capacity helps you develop new skills and competencies, helps you see that, as you said, things work out, but if you panic and when something's not happening the way you want, you tend to miss what's in front of you
Mm,
because you're now, oh, something's wrong with me. The whole system's screwed up, or you blame, that other person, and it takes your eye off the target because now you're so upset about what's wrong. And you know, biochemically you have cortisol running through your body, and that's not healthy. Now you have this stress. It almost creates these blind spots for you. So taking on things really helps you grow as a person and grow beyond where you are. It's no different than being a 2-year-old that wants to learn to tie their shoes and they don't do it well, but at some point, at 4 or 5 they can tie their shoes. And you constantly throughout your life you take on things. But as I said before, adults seem to want to be settled and say, "Hey, I'm already smart and I don't need to learn anything new."
exactly. Exactly. So you created something called the Disruptive Leadership Model. Can you talk to us more about what that is?
Sure, sure. Well, that's kind of what we were moving in that direction.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's perfect time.
Intentional disruption. So, people may have heard me say this in the past. If you're the CEO or leader in an organization, if you're not intentionally creating problems, you should be fired or retrained immediately. Your job is to intentionally create disruption. And when John F. Kennedy said, we'll send a man to the moon before the end of the decade, that was a problem for the nation to solve. And it disrupted the normal trajectory. Without him saying that, perhaps we would have never thought about going to the moon. And in fact, about 40 years before he said that in the 1920s, a aeronautics engineer by the name of Robert Goddard said, one day man will fly to the moon. And the New York Times wrote this scathing article about how much of an imbecile Goddard was for thinking man could ever fly to the moon. In 1969, they had to write a new article to apologize to him. Disruption, uh, disrupting the way you automatically always do things can be very healthy to support your growth, to support your capacity to take on larger and larger projects, to be able to handle life's circumstances because they happen. You have pandemics, you have black swans, you have stock market crashes, you have rallies. So, how do you manage yourself? So, when you're a leader in an organization and you intentionally create problems, it's really healthy for the organization because you ask people to create things that are not part of the normal trajectory. So, who would have ever seen that Apple computer would one day make cell phones? You just didn't see that in the 80s or 80s. That's disruptive, except it created an entirely new revenue stream and it disrupted the way people in the organization think. So it allows people to expand not only their skills and competencies, their view of the world, who their customers are, and even their view of themselves and what they know they are capable of. So disruption can be extremely healthy, uh, but if it's disruption, just you going around with a white glove and saying your desk is dirty, that doesn't empower your people. Asking your people to do things that they don't know how to do and providing the tools and resources and training is a great way to develop your people and as an organization to become a leader in your industry.
Yeah, I mean, even just driving a different route to the store or something, or, when I was driving to work, when I worked in the corporate world, I would try and take a different route just to change it up. And then when I did that, I was inspired to try new places oh, I found a new restaurant, just
Right,
little things like that.
right.
Why does disruption lead to innovation?
Well, disruption leads to innovation because I hate to use this word force, but it forces you to think in a way you normally do not think. And so I'll give an example. I read about a company and it had an engineering department and they would disrupt new hires every time they were, on their first day. And what they did is they gave the new hire on their first day of work a project that none of the engineers knew how to solve. So according to the engineers, it was unsolvable. And so they gave it to them to better understand how that new hire, how they thought, how they dealt with frustration. And one day they hired a guy who sat down and said, "The reason this doesn't work is this," and he solved the problem. And they never
Right.
did that to a new hire again, which is unfortunate because when you disrupt your normal train of thinking, it allows you to look and develop new perspectives. So that really does enhance your intelligence because now you have a much wider view of the world and yourself and your own capabilities. So when I was speaking earlier about the brain and neural pathways, there's something called neuroplasticity, meaning that your brain is plastic, it's malleable, and it can become more nimble. And it's the disruptions that have you rethink how you want to solve problems. John D. Rockefeller Sr. is a great example of that also because he had Standard Oil and he some people say he monopolized the oil refinery and kerosene. So people didn't have electricity in their homes. So they bought kerosene, put it in a lamp, and that's how they had light in their house at night or outside at night. And when Edison started putting electricity in their homes, people did not use kerosene. His sales were dropping. It didn't matter how good his kerosene was, people were taking electricity. That disrupted Standard Oil. And what it did is had them rethink the business. And Rockefeller said, hey, there's this guy, Henry Ford, who's making this automobile so inexpensive that a lot of people can buy it. What can we provide for the automobile? And what they found is the gasoline to make kerosene, they were dumping millions of gallons of gasoline in the river. They were throwing it away. So now,
Right.
because of the disruption, it allowed them to see that they had the product that they were discarding that they can now sell to all these new buyers of automobiles. So without that disruption, they would have continued to dump gasoline into the ocean because it was not marketable from where they were standing.
Right. Yeah, those are amazing examples. But how do you how do people train themselves mentally to function in the chaos instead of emotionally reacting to it? Like how do people become less reactive?
Sure, sure. You use the correct word, training. It's really
Mm,
analogous to Navy SEAL training. Navy
I was
SEAL
just gonna
training
say,
is
yeah,
it's very much training people to be able to navigate themselves in the face of anything. Like Navy SEALs are trained to be dropped in the middle of nowhere and manage whatever happens in front of them. It's not like you can call back or you're going to use Chat GPT to give you an answer. You have to be
right.
nimble enough. And so, one of the things they do with Navy SEALs is they put them in a lot of chaotic situations and they also teach them many different things. And it goes back to the neuroplasticity. So, they have brains that are much more nimble. They study things. And perhaps a lot of those people who want to be Navy SEALs have possibly already started down that kind of path of learning many different things. So, with my training, I'm not going to drown people in water or have them carry logs like Navy SEALs, but through the training, there's a simulation of disrupting the way people think. And one of the things that happens in my training is people develop and learn this distinction between thinking and having thoughts. Having thoughts, those are all the things that you've heard, you've learned, you've read. These are things that you know about. Thinking requires you to think that which is unthought. And most people, even the world of psychology, say most people out of every hour, waking hour, 55 minutes is dedicated to just having thoughts about things you already know or heard about. Only about 5 minutes of that hour is dedicated to actually thinking about things that you've never thought about. Thinking that which is unthought can be very uncomfortable. It's almost like you're developing a muscle in the gym that you've never exercised. So it's uncomfortable at first. You're sore. So through my training, it's training people to think so that when they're in the face of chaos, when they're in uncertainty, instead of withdrawing and saying, well, let me sort of check my database in my brain and there's no reference here. Instead of saying there's no reference and I don't know what to do or become frustrated, you have a greater capacity to navigate through that uncertainty. And I've literally had people that I've trained say in the beginning, they felt like I was drowning them. And then I was drowning them in these conversations where they had to think about things that they never thought. But they said over time, they found themselves being able to swim. And the better they were able to swim, it didn't matter how deep the water was, they now had the capacity to swim as opposed to feeling overwhelmed. So the training is very much that, uh, and it's uncovering blind spots. So what are the things that derail you when you are in uncertainty? Like we have almost like an automaticity that tells us if I don't know this, there's this consequence. I'm a bad person. I don't belong. I'm embarrassing. Uh, you know, I, I don't know what to do. There's a penalty, and it usually comes from something from your past, and it derails you. When you can uncover that, tends to have less power on you, which then frees you up to make choices as opposed to the automaticity of a past event dominating the current circumstance of uncertainty. So training is the correct word. There's a simulation of creating uncertainty and requiring people to think in a way they normally don't, which is very much involved in the training.
I'm curious, Ted, what role does the corporate culture or environment play in whether someone succeeds during chaos or gets crushed by it?
Sure. So it Yeah. So, kind of leaving off with what I just said, social anthropologists say that a culture of anything, of a nation, a company, a family, is a network of conversations. So, in your
Hmm.
company, your culture is the network of conversations. And so, what are people saying at the water cooler about the organization, about management? What are they saying about the company at home? Also, what are your vendors and your clients saying? So, that all becomes part of your culture. But there's
Yeah.
also an unspoken there are things that people don't say, which is also part of the cultures. If you're I've been in companies where the culture is our organization, the culture is a plague. It's the black plague. And if we hire a new person who's a great performer, eventually they will catch what we have and they'll be just like us. So when you
Hmm.
want to accomplish something new, it's like people have the culture creates these presuppositions as what you can and cannot do. And that's what those conversations, those beliefs will derail the organization.
Absolutely. And you make such a good point about the vibe. Like you can feel energetically when something is off too. And so I think that's where communication comes in and the ability to speak what's on your mind. And so if you feel safe in your environment, I think that that environment is going to thrive compared to an unsafe environment where people are very reactive. And so I know for myself, when I'm around super relaxed people, I'm even more relaxed. But if I'm around people who are untrusting or pessimistic, then that makes me feel like I'm on edge, even if they're not saying anything. You can just feel their vibe. So it is interesting. But we do need those super calm people in those environments to affect the stressed out people. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
Well, that's an interesting thing that you bring up. So, a lot of times, what we call vibes are the result of stories that we make up in our own head, and then we
Yeah.
respond to it as though it's real, and that can become infectious to other people. So, the company Mastercard, when they first started, I forget the CEO's name, the guy they put in there. He had a great philosophy. He had several great philosophies. But one of the things that he did is when there was a rumor, he addressed it to the entire organization. I hear there's a rumor, so whether you call it we have a bad vibe or it, so someone made up a story in their head about what they think is doing because no one said anything about this. So he would literally address it and say, that's not what's happening. This is what's happening. So to your point about communication, so the I think the biggest thing that I'm saying with that is when you look at it on a micro and a macro. So on a macro, there's a rumor in the organization. When you address it, it goes away. On the
Hmm.
individual level, people make up stories in their own head. And when you confront those stories that you've made up and you see that it's a made up story and it was never true, that also goes away. It loses its
Hmm.
grip on you. But that's usually what derails people in the face of chaos and uncertainty. The story they made up about themselves and what they think they can and cannot do or what's possible and impossible. I mean, it's when the Wright brothers were building their flying machine, people ridiculed them. They had all these stories about what can and cannot be done when it comes to flying. They'd say, you guys build bicycles, go back to your day job. If man were meant to fly, he'd have wings. You guys are wasting your time. All of these things until it happened. And then a whole new world opens up for people.
Unbelievable, right? Like just the belief that they had to have in themselves and their idea. And no matter what anyone else said, it didn't derail their end goal.
Right. Right.
That is really amazing. Essentially, the world that we perceive is a direct reflection to our inner state. And so when I've been, going through anxiety or times of depression, or, feeling self-conscious for some reason, then I perceive the world so much differently than when I'm
Right. Right.
happy. And so it just goes to show that the work that we need to do is on ourselves, in order to build resilience emotionally instead of being, and then that helps to not be derailed by the chaos. So I'm a believer that the more work we do on our mindset and our strength and resilience is going to directly affect how we react in those situations of chaos where other people bring, it's no one else's fault but our own, essentially. I like taking responsibility for everything.
Great word, responsibility. Yes. I would say it's no one's fault. You have what you have. Now, if you're 2 years old and can't tie your shoe, there's no reason the world is upset with you for being a 2-year-old that doesn't know how to
Yeah.
tie your shoe. If you're 20 and you don't know how to tie your shoe, there may be questions about your parents and their parenting and what they taught you.
Yeah. Or maybe you're just a Velcro lover. I don't know.
Well, I guess they made Velcro for those people. I don't want to tie my shoes.
Totally.
So so I want to say something counterintuitive for most people because we hear so much about resilience, and resilience has its place. Something happens and you can recover from it. That's really not my training. My
Mm,
training is so that you can navigate through it. So I mentioned Navy SEALs, and Navy SEALs are definitely trained to navigate chaos. But the best example is US football. And if you're a running back, once you're given that ball, you don't want to be the guy who's resilient after you get clobbered a bunch of times. You want to
you're
be the
right.
guy that goes through the chaos and comes out on the other side with a touchdown. So that means
Hmm.
either you're a powerhouse that just plows over people like a freight train, or you're this nimble guy who can get hit, spin off, move, you make a move, and you fake out the defense, which then creates an opening. So I fake to the left and go to the right, and I go straight downfield. And I have so much speed that I run right past you and no one can catch me. So there are things that you can develop as a running back that it's not about resilience. It's about going through the chaos and coming out on the other end with a touchdown. So my work is so that people can navigate the chaos and not have to take all the hits and punishment and then lick their wounds and say, I recovered. Look at me. That over time developed somewhat of a victim mindset. Like I always overcome the hardships. What the running back who goes through it, that guy is not a victim. He's showing his prowess. Like, give me the ball and I'll embarrass the entire defense. They won't even touch me.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually a really, really good point. So then, can you give the audience some practical tools on how they can begin to train themselves to become calmer under pressure?
Sure, sure. Ideally, because it's almost like doing brain surgery on yourself. So
Yeah.
most people won't do brain surgery on themselves. You'll find a great brain surgeon to do it on you or one of your loved ones. It would be ideal to find someone who could actually train you to become that person. The things that you can do on your own, it's going back to the word I use from ancient Greece, which is eudaimonia, intentionally create possibilities for yourself that stretch you beyond what you normally do. So if you've never worked out in the gym, working out in the gym or doing yoga is an excellent way to develop neuroplasticity because you're moving your body and you're engaging in activities that your brain is not accustomed to. So your brain now has to grow in a new way to develop these new capacities. So you can do that by exercising, you can do it by learning a new language, or you can do it even developing a new hobby, collecting stamps. It doesn't matter what the hobby is, but these are all activities that will stretch you beyond your normal way of thinking. And when you bring that back to your business life, you have these new perspectives that you didn't have in the past. And your brain now has greater bandwidth for being able to handle uncertainty because you took on an uncertain and new activity that helped you, as you said, become calmer in the face of chaos.
Yeah. Sometimes I challenge myself to do something that scares the crap out of me just so that I can rattle my own cage essentially and put my ego away, even if it's not like really out there. I just like doing new things and trying new things that make us a little bit nervous. Like humans don't like to feel any type of uncomfortable. We've been trained to want predictability and comfort, right? But I always find I get the most satisfaction and the most intense peace of mind after going through something like that, putting myself through that on purpose. And then you end up learning so much more about who you are as a human being. Um, yeah, it can be easier said than done. What about you, Ted? What are some of the hardest moments in your own life that have taught you the most about leadership and resilience?
Hardest moments. Well, maybe I'll start with a pleasurable and easy moment. So I left the country for 2.5 years and I went through Central America. I lived in the jungle with Mayan Indians, no electricity or running water, and the real hut with the dirt floor. And agricultural society, we chopped down the jungle with a machete and then would get a stick and make a hole in the ground and drop the seeds in. So that was a lifestyle that I would have never seen in New Jersey, or I lived in Washington, D.C. also. So that was a way to have my brain and see myself in an environment that was completely unfamiliar. Like I had no
Yeah.
knowledge of that. And what I saw about leadership in that environment, I saw something great. I saw a real community. So I stayed with a family and I saw how families work together. So, we're chopping down literally 100, 150 acres of jungle, and you have your neighbor and his son come help you because we're not there. We had zero machines. So, all the manpower you can have makes life a little easier to be able to collaborate with your neighbors. So I saw leadership, collaboration, and I saw leadership in an environment where money was not your competitive edge. So how do you engage one another when money is not the thing that empowers people? So that was a great thing to see how collaboration, clear communication, all of that was important from a leadership perspective. In
Wow,
a
that's really inspiring.
in a difficult situation, it happened before I left the country. I lost both parents in one day, and I'm the oldest of four. So
Oh
that,
my gosh.
yes, that required. I mean, I could have just walked away and said, "Hey, I lost my parents, and I'm now going to fall apart," and hope for resilience. But instead, I took over the family. At some point, my youngest sister came to live with me in the different state where I lived, and I learned a lot about delegation and coaching people up and being able to navigate and still accomplish the things that you commit to in the face of all this going on. Families angry, uncertainty because I've never been in this situation, and who do I go to that can tell me they've been through the same exact situation? So, I'm sort of feeling my way through the dark, but the way you do that is you commit to something and you stay true to that commitment and you accomplish it even in the face of everything going on. You don't take your eye off of what your original commitment.
Yeah, it's impossible to predict what's gonna happen. It's absolutely impossible. Every time I've tried to control a situation and think ahead as to what's gonna happen, I was never right. Never right.
Mm,
And that's part of the lesson. It's like that control. I don't know. To me, releasing the control is the most important part of not needing control. So, Ted, I really, really enjoyed today's conversation. I would love for you to tell the listeners more about the work that you do and where they can find out more information about it.
sure, sure. I have a website, turnaroundip.com, and IP is like intellectual property. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I have, you'll see on LinkedIn, I post quite a few articles, and I usually write some sort of introduction about it, which gives you better insight into the way I think. And I also have quite a few videos on YouTube where people can hear other perspectives that I have about business and even intimate relationships.
Amazing. What if listeners remember one thing from this conversation today? What do you hope that is?
Things are usually not as bad as you think they are. When something happens, we tend to magnify the problem, which then makes it worse, and it even can send us into a paralysis or or sort of an anger because we think life shouldn't be this way. So life has problems, things happen, and how you manage yourself in the face of things happening is most important.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much, Ted, for being here today and for sharing more of you with the world and the work that you do. I think it's really important work. And what a better time to have this work than now. Because, like I said at the beginning, the world is changing and there's so much more uncertainty than ever right now. And the people that are going to thrive are the ones that are going to be okay with the uncertainties.
Right.
Thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing.
No, thanks for having me. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
So much fun. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. If I really think this conversation was so powerful because so many people are trying to escape uncertainty instead of thriving and embracing it. So let's become stronger inside of uncertainty versus pushing it away. So Ted Santos reminded us that chaos does not destroy people. It reveals innovation and sometimes it even reveals leadership. So in the end, we learn what we are capable of becoming. If you enjoyed this episode, we will make sure to include all of Ted's information in the show notes so you can access his website and more of the work that he does. And again, if you enjoyed this episode and you feel like it can help someone else, if someone else you know would benefit from this episode, please send it to them so they too can become calmer in chaos. Stay tuned for the next episode, everyone. Until then, take real good care. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.